Major League Baseball will lose regular season games over a labor dispute for the first time in 27 years. And I think the negative slide of their usual original 162 game schedule down to the current 156 game schedule will likely continue, because I don't think there are any mutual agreements on key issues on both sides at this time. And it doesn't seem that it'll happen anytime soon. So as a result, I think players and fans alike will both majorly be negatively impacted by this strike. So I thought it best to bring in a great friend of our show, former Dodger exec and 35-year sports journalist, Jorge Martín, to help us clarify a few things. Always lean on him, especially for MLB things. I think we're going to lean on his expertise, on Jorge's expertise, a lot on this matter in the coming weeks. Hang tight. We hope you'll enjoy. We are going to dig a little bit into what's happening with MLB. I was very excited. I have two things I would love, just quick hits we'd love to do today with Jorge. And I want to make sure that we ask our resident guru, sports journalist, 35 plus years, my guy right here. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about, I want to make sure that we just address some basic stuff with MLB right now. MLBPA. Their proposal, I believe, let me read it correctly. Their proposal includes a $5 million drop in pre-arbitration bonus pool money. And I think it's from 85 million to 80 million. And the CPT, which would be the competitive balance tax, is still the same. And so MLB and the Major League Players Association still seem to be a ways away from finding some sort of common ground. And I think the two key topics is something, if we could just touch on today, we don't have to go too inside baseball, even though we're trying to go inside baseball, the CBT, as well as the arbitration bonus pool, and ask Jorge what he knows, what he thinks. I just love to be a little bit more educated about the whole situation. So it's on you, my man.
No, well, I wish they could just decide, hey, you know what, let's cut it in half and go to, I think it was right. I think the midway point would be like $50 million, and have that money be divided up between those players who just, who are making the league minimum and who are completely outperforming, and they're already performing among the best players in baseball. Cody Bellinger, when he won the MVP, he was still arbitration eligible, and he deserved to make more than the league minimum. Obviously, these numbers are crazy for, the league minimum is still great money, but when you think about compared to what other guys are making, it's nuts. I mean, that money could be sprinkled around, the top players in the game, the top rising stars who have come and they've grabbed that brass ring and just kind of run with it and already established themselves as among the best players in the game. And they have to do it for, a couple more years before they become arbitration eligible. So I really wish they would do that, but the owners just are, they're just giving a little bit here and there. And I think one of the things that's come out about this lockout, strike, whatever, this labor strife that we call, I think it's finally coming out that it's, because in the past people have blamed the players. It's like, oh, they're so well paid. Well, you know what? The players themselves, the superstar players, Mike Trout, is one of the highest paid players in the game. Mookie Betts, their salaries are somewhere in, $33 to $35 million dollars a year. That's not that much more than 22 years ago when Alex Rodriguez signed for $25 million. So revenues in baseball have not gone up the equivalent of $8 million a year, which would probably be 15 to 20%. They haven't gone up like that. They've gone up. The Dodgers were sold in 2004 for what it was about. It wasn't even, $450 million, somewhere thereabouts. And then 8 years later, they were sold for 5 times that.
Right.
So,
Right.
and so player salaries are not growing up by 5 times. So that's the thing. The players need to be getting a little bit a better chunk. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
owners, they're still the owners. They're the ones who are, bearing the risk. Yes, they need to be making more than anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
but
Oh yeah.
they can't just keep giving, pennies, pennies when they're getting dollars. So they need to get, they need to realize that without these fantastic players, this game
Mm-hmm.
is not, this game is nowhere. So I'd really like to see them come closer to the middle and offer, make a good offer, raise the competitive balance tax. And to me, the other thing that I really want to see, I want to see these teams to have a minimum salary. I know they're trying to go after that, a minimum, a minimum number that teams need to be spending, total spending on player salaries, because there are
Mm-hmm.
teams like the Baltimore Orioles who just cut salaries and they just bring up kids. And then these
Mm-hmm.
kids are making nothing. And then the team loses like 110 games a year. And what is that doing to their fan base? The
Right.
Baltimore Orioles have one of the greatest fan bases in Major League Baseball, and they are crushing these people. And
Mm-hmm.
these people, and that's what because who's going to get tired? Aren't you going to get tired of following a loser for 2-3 years in a row? No, you got to make sure, you got to spend some money. You got to get those players who are in the middle. These are players who are outside of free, who've already gone through the arbitration. Maybe they're not superstars, they're not all stars, but they are serviceable players, good ball
Mm-hmm.
players, who are being forced to take, who are being forced to take, just contracts that aren't worth, maybe they don't take a 5-year deal, but maybe they take a 1 or 2 year deal for, a decent amount of money, instead of just having to take a big pay cut a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, because they're not an all-star. But not every team is filled with all-stars. There have to be guys that come in and do the job for you. So, and
Absolutely.
a prime example, this guy became an all-star last year, but Chris Taylor for the Dodgers, he
Mm-hmm.
was, he was that guy who played all over the place, and he always was able to hit. Hit with
Mm-hmm.
some power, stole some bases, was a good ball player. Last year he became an all-star, but before that, he was a player that maybe would have gotten cut out by other teams, because he wasn't, he wasn't somebody that was going to be, the guy that you make a bobblehead out of, a guy that you
Right.
put on your schedules or on your
Right.
marquees or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the important thing. I mean, you need those players to have a great game, because you're not always going to be able to do that with kids. So that's why I want to see those players in the middle class to start being better compensated. Yeah, this really should be over. We should be talking about spring training. We should be talking about who's the hot rookie. We should be talking about what Mookie Betts looks like. We should be talking. And the other thing is, even when they sign the collective bargaining agreement,
Mm-hmm.
immediately they have to start negotiating with a lot of players. I think the number was somewhere around 200 free agents that are still out there.
Really.
And there are guys like Clayton Kershaw, Freddie Freeman,
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Correa. These are some superstars in the game that are unsigned right now. And there are a lot of players like that, but there are also a lot of guys who are serviceable middle relievers, who are, there are utility infielders, who are,
Mm-hmm.
guys who could come in and help a team win games. But they're right now without a job, and they're going to be, these teams that are going to be going furiously to try and sign these guys while opening up spring training. It's going to be wild. It is going to be Wild West like you wouldn't believe. It's going to be, our heads are going to be spinning. It's going to be
Right.
amazing, amazing, amazing. And
Or is that crazy like a fox amazing? Because this is one way. It's not the best way, but I agree with you. I think it's going to be bananas here. But you've touched on quite a few really good points that I agree with. One of them in particular, I love that you actually came from the standpoint that you're supporting the players completely, but not just to be just so much on just to be a fan with just the players. You also gave the props and the understanding that I see is lacking in a lot of these conversations that has 100% to do with, well, the owners have to get they have to be on top of the whole thing because they're bearing all the negatives also if something were to happen. That's the thing people forget about in all business. We get into this because it's a fan-driven thing. It's not like a company like 3M or somebody that makes a widget, and then the players, the people that work there want to unionize and whatever their reasons, but the problem with those circumstances versus this is more than likely you can get a certain type or more types of individuals to work at X corporation factory to help you push these things out, even at a high level, versus the unique skill set of those that play the professional sports. I mean, they're like the 1% of the 1% of the 1% who can do these things, and each of them can only do it for X amount of time. And bottom line is, yes, the owners should take off the top. I'm 100% with that because they also are taking the risk. When there is a loss, the players don't incur that loss. They and their reps don't incur. That's just the fact of how this is structured. So there's always that little caveat in there. However, as much as I love that Magic is an owner, I love that Peter Guber is a partial owner up at the Warriors, I will never pay for a Dodger ticket to go for the fact that Magic owns the team. I will never watch the Warriors play, and Steph Curry in particular, who I love to watch play, because someone who makes movies that I like is an owner. I dig Jerry Jones as a personality. A lot of people dislike that guy. Whatever your idea of him, I never watch the Cowboys because he's the owner. So this unique space of athletics, professional sports, that's who puts butts in the seats. Give them something commiserate with what's happening, like you were saying about the percentages that have risen in the past 20 years since A-Rod's contract. It needs to be, that does need to, the players I think need to share in a great way. They're not making widgets. They are different. And it's not about their short time because that's their choice to have a potential short career span in this type of field. But the bottom line is I turn the Dodgers on because I want to see Kershaw. I want to see Betts. And CT3, I love that guy. I loved watching Taylor play. Even Turner, no one can still explain to me what the whole, the back leaning thing before Turner swings. That's entertaining to me. So pay these guys, bobblehead or not. I think they all should have something going on. So I can see how fired up you are about it. That's why I love talking to you about this stuff and learning from you all this stuff. So I think for now, all the points that you gave us are fantastic for today. I have a feeling, as your head was about to explode there, which I agree with the exploding, by the way, about what's going to happen and I'm thinking over the next several weeks, it's going to be good for us to continue to peel back some layers as this thing progresses. So just for today, I think you've done a good job in setting it up, and we'll definitely do a lot more in the coming weeks. So how about we wrap with this? I'm thinking that as much as we're talking about the objective pieces and the thing that we mentioned before, anything to do with the CBT and the arbitration bonus pool, as important as those things are, and you can break those things break them down for me all day in helping me and everyone else to understand at a higher level. But let's talk about something else that's a little more on the gray side, but no less entertaining. It's the fact that football's done. You and I both know football's the big daddy. But even in the off season, they don't look to see what anyone else is doing, what the NBA is doing, what's MLB doing. So we got to make sure we schedule this on this day. NFL is like, well, what day do you guys want to have the draft? What day do you want to have the combine? They just go do it because it's the baddest television product out there. This past weekend with the combine going on, watching that big guy from University of Georgia run a
342 pounds.
I'm like, and I saw a little bit. Yes, this kid's incredible. I love watching it. It's fascinating.
Well, one of the things, they were very smart in when they placed it. I mean, a lot of scouts were kind of like, oh my God, the Super Bowl just ended 2 weeks ago. But what they did was they planned it last week. What was significant about last week? It's the week before NCAA conference tournaments.
Smart,
So this week
smart.
they're going to have the conference tournaments. There's going to be lots of eyeballs. Last week, yes, you saw some last games. You saw Coach K coach's last game at Cameron Indoor Arena. But no, they planned it perfectly there. And then, and you're talking about the calendar. Well, NFL free agency is gonna take place between March 14 to 16.
Coming up.
So and the thing about NFL free agency, the superstars sign on the day of. So I'm actually planning a show on March 16th. Nice. To just kind of go through, okay, where did this guy go and what's the fantasy impact of that? Well, they did that. And why is it very smart that they did that? It's the Wednesday before the NCAA tournament starts.
Right? Because those following 3 weekends will be all about, and football is they do such a great job with that.
Oh yeah,
and this is why I feel with all the stuff that almost popped your head at the beginning of this a second ago regarding what's happening with MLB. I'm actually thinking that you and I both believe at some point sooner than later they'll come to the table. They'll figure this out. They'll make it happen. So I think it's going to take place. Now, with that being, I actually think the NBA has the most to benefit by what's happening with the MLB being off the table and football not being in full swing yet, even with what you mentioned. If it'll take MLB a couple of months, even if they settle everything today. By the time they get everything moving, the machine going and everything, getting what games are going to happen when and how and adjusting the schedule, and they get going, there's still that momentum. There's still a little confusion. So NBA is going to have some sort of window that's going to benefit them at this section. That's where I think it's going to benefit them. And, there was an article today that I think came out with the Boston Globe, and it had to do with Major League Soccer should capitalize on MLB's staggering in limbo right now. And I said, well, I don't care what soccer does. I mean, they'll get some few extra eyeballs, I'm sure, those that are soccer cohorts, but America, baseball, basketball, football, period. I mean, those are our primaries, right? So I actually think right now the NBA with certain storylines, Kevin Durant just passing 25,000 points in his career, puts him up there, top 10. What's going to happen with the supposedly surging Warriors? I actually think with what LeBron did the other day and scoring 50 plus points, those storylines, what's really going to happen with Philly with Embiid and Harden? Can they fuse together in time? Because they look formidable. All those different storylines, and what's happening with the quiet Milwaukee Bucks, who I love because they're so understated. That's the underdog story that I like. So I love the Bucks. I love that they're quiet. They don't bark. They just come out there, and all of a sudden you look and they beat us. How did they beat us? They just beat almost everybody. Yep. And so they're a good watch. And so those are just a handful of stories that could happen.
And don't forget the young studs, John Morant. Zion Williamson.
I was going to get to them, man.
Luka. I mean, you got these young stars, and think about it. If Major League Baseball doesn't, let's say they cut out the first 2 weeks of April, that is the lead-in to the NBA playoffs.
Because March Madness will just be falling out.
So
into the NBA playoffs, is LeBron going to make it or not? Well, John Morant. Even though, Memphis is way over there, they're in the Western Conference. So he's going to have to deal with that young dude. He's still going to have to deal with those Warriors.
Yeah.
He's going to have to deal with think about it. The two best teams in the Western Conference are in the Lakers division. The Pacific. You have the Phoenix Suns and you have the Warriors. That's a problem. I don't know what the Lakers are going to do if they're able to do anything anyway, because if they're able to even squeak into the playoffs, they're not going to have a shot against either one of those teams, and those teams will be 1-2. If the Lakers squeak in, they're either going to squeak in through a play-in game, or they'll be the 8th seed, and they're going to play 1 or 2. I don't see how it's going to happen, especially with Anthony Davis not being around. So whatever on that, but I just think as a whole, the NBA itself is going to have an opportunity here. We do believe MLB will come back. I don't believe that NBA is poised at this time, unfortunately, to take advantage of MLB being in limbo. And so, what do you think about that? Do you think so? You were just saying you think that could happen. I don't know if their product is going to be in sync enough. I think when MLB gets its stuff together, I think there'll be certain types of headlines that could overshadow the potential of what could happen in the NBA. Too many injuries. People are over the whole superstar thing, and basketball has the biggest superstars of all, right? Because they're just more personable. It's just the way the game is structured versus football with the helmets. Baseball, you're so far away from them. I mean, you personally seem as if you know these hoopsters. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But basketball has a small window of possibility to bring themselves back as far as butts in the seats in front of the television. And so that'll be the benefit to them, I believe, if MLB doesn't get itself together. So I'll let you say the last word and we'll wrap up here.
Well, the thing is, MLB, if they're going to do a shortened spring training, which will probably be somewhere around 3 weeks of exhibition games. Usually it's about 5 weeks of exhibition games. Those 2 extra weeks, they're basically the first 2 weeks of 2 to 3 weeks of the MLB season for the pitchers will still be kind of like spring training. They're not going to be throwing 100 pitches. They'll probably be throwing 75 to 80 pitches, probably somewhere between 60 and 80 during that point. And so there's going to be, the need for all the, for relief pitchers to be throwing more innings. And I think that's going to be it'll be kind of rough at the beginning. The hitters might start out a little bit hotter. Plus the other thing is, in certain cities where it's cold, you get a little later in the calendar, the weather's you're not going to see 40-degree games, 40-degree days in Chicago or Detroit or those kind of cities. It might be, the weather will be a little bit nicer. Maybe it's not 70, 80 degrees, but maybe it's in the 60s and it's a little more conducive to baseball playing outside. So I think the game could be rough. I mean, the big thing that baseball could do is settle this thing, get as many superstars into camp, and just put the focus on the players. Get them in front of as many cameras, get as many feature stories in the newspapers and on the websites and those places. Just have the focus be on the game. Don't get that bad taste out of the mouth, because that's the thing that is souring fans right now. Put the focus on Shohei Ohtani. Put the focus on Fernando Tatis. Get these beautiful players who are the best players in the world in this beautiful game, this beautiful, difficult game that it is to play, and get them, and let's start making them the focal point again, and get them in front of the fans so they could start consuming it. They could start buying the jerseys. They could start getting excited about whenever opening day is. So that's the thing that needs to happen. And maybe they'll look past the fact that, oh my goodness, my starting pitcher, the starting pitcher for my team, my ace, came out after the 4th inning because he got up to his pitch count, because he's still building up, and that's what's going to happen. So
couldn't agree more. I agree with everything you just stated. I love it.
There could be some high-pitched softball games in there because of the fact that because they'll be going to bullpens, and I think the bullpens will be kind of tired for the first month of the season because guys are going to be going a lot. I hope that they allow for extended bullpens to be, so that not so many guys are having to go 2-3 days in a row. But just give me back some baseball, please. The football season was so amazing. The playoffs were amazing, and I think that's the one thing that MLB has kind of lost sight of, the fact that NFL really had a fantastic run there, and they're keeping that momentum. They're going to keep this momentum all the way through the end of April with the NFL draft, and so it's going to be the combine. There were some spectacular players, some spectacular performances, and these guys are going to just get hyped for the next 6-7 weeks up until that draft day. But hopefully, baseball gets its act together, and they get ready. They get ready to give us our game.
I agree completely, because I love the guys you named, Ohtani and Tatis and all of these guys. Our guys, of course, we're a little biased, but, our Dodger guys. And, is Randy Arozarena coming back? You think he's going to be okay? So pulling
I
up the
think
East Coast.
Yeah.
And because on the West, we have these guys. We have right here in L.A., Ohtani, and we have in San Diego, we have Tatis, and we have our Dodgers crew. And so just those three teams in Cali, Southern Cal alone, that people will want to see that. Not just the regional people in Los Angeles. I'm talking about in the country. Those are games with those three stars that I believe, and Ohtani's on the team with arguably the best player in the whole league, Trout. So those are television packages that you could put together, I think, quite easily to put out there that I think would do exceptionally well, not just regionally, but nationally, national games, just as they've always played, Yankee games and things of that nature. Certain teams and certain players, I agree with you, they should lean a little bit more, like to how basketball does things, NBA versus the NFL. NFL is about the shield and the company, blah, blah, blah. And rightfully so, because that's just how that game is built. Basketball is at its core a little bit more free form and how the players, and you can deal with the individuality a little bit more than you could in any other sport. I think maybe baseball needs to lean a little bit more. They're going to need all the help they can get because of this. I think it's going to pull some people back as far as fans. Some people will, do the flip off and this and that, like, hey, I'm done with you guys. Get over it. Millionaires and billionaires fighting. Why should I care? Gas is $5 a gallon, and I can't buy for my family what I used to. You guys get on the field. You guys work it out. Billionaires, you work it out with the millionaires, and give us the games, and we'll support you, type of thing. I think I've heard a lot of people say things in that space moving forward. So we'll check back in because I want to do, I think the next couple of weeks, I'd love to do a couple of different blitzes. One, definitely keeping our eye on what's happening in MLB, number one. And number two, I do agree with you. I didn't want to bring it up too much because you and I could do another 45 minutes to an hour on what's going to happen, in particular with the NFL free agency, with the gunslinger out of Green Bay, what's going to happen there. That is going to tilt a lot of things in all of the NFL, because if he lands in Denver, that puts him in direct collision course with what's happening in KC. I mean, gunslinger 1, gunslinger 1A, or they're both gunslinger 1 tied for 1. Mahomes,
and don't forget don't forget the guy with the Chargers. He's a gunslinger.
Yes,
1C.
He's right behind them. I think Herbert will be able to catch them in the next couple of years. And Derek Carr is not that bad. He's a really good quarterback for the Raiders. So those four in that division would be incredible to watch, let alone what we saw from young guy with Cincinnati and old guy with the Rams, who I love, and all this other stuff. And who knows what's going to happen? Is TB going to go with San Francisco? Because it looks like Garoppolo is going to be shipped out. Anyway, we can go on that all day. We're gonna do another specific episode just on NFL free agencies. NFL free agencies, what's wise, how, and just prognosticate. Just have fun with it and say blah, 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 as if anybody cares what anybody says. So anyway, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming in. We're definitely going to keep tabs with you on any and everything MLB until opening day is decided, until they finally get off their doofs and figure out, okay, guys, let's go, so that the average Joe and fans can come back in groves. My son's baseball season just started this past weekend. These kids want to be able to come home and watch the big boys play. Their season started, with all the parents being knuckleheads and fighting about things. If they can get it together at all these little league levels and all the club team levels, these billionaires and millionaires have to get it together, because they're going to lose these fans. These kids will begin to watch other things or to play video games, and say, yeah, whatever. I don't want to watch Tatis. I don't want to watch Trout. And so that's what we want to keep our eye on. So again, appreciate you, bro. I thank you, and we'll hook up in the next week or so and do some more.
Salud, Clyde. Thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. Take care.